Hello everyone, it's Nikki Batgirl D'Angelo here for my Veterans Day first flight. And what better place to go to than to first flight over by Kill Devil Hills. This was a long flight. What do you think of the livery? I found this inside of the livery folder from this airplane that I purchased. And then I found out that there was a way to get Flight Simulator X to work with your Windows 8 system. Thank you very much, whoever you were, to tell me about the Lockheed Martin flight simulator that is based on it. And also, all you had to do is right-click and go run in compatibility mode. Nonetheless, here I am in a very unusual situation. I'm sitting at Cobb McCollum Airport, which is tiny, and right down the street, or I should say about 5 to 8 miles away from the Air Force Base where these jets actually belong. There is absolutely no way these jets would be able to land and take off. The C-130 definitely. It's a very, very, very awesome aircraft and could go into very small, unpaved, short runways. But the KC-10 over there, no, it would never be at this airport. Nonetheless, I've got everything all situated. You're getting a look at the F-Star, which is the actual version of the DA-42 that I'm going to be flying. And I will tell you, you will be getting mostly the highlights from this one because this was a long flight. It was a 400-mile flight at 120 to 150 knots. And let's just put it this way. There is never going to be a flight that I take that long again and try to make a video out of it. First off, the recorded video is 47 gigs. Second off, I was bored, and I'm sure that you all will be bored also. And one thing I found out about Flight Simulator X versus this one, which is called X-Plane 10, is in X-Plane you have a wonderful representation of the Garmin 430 and 530 units. It is just amazing. And here you have it, a glass cockpit for the DA-42. I didn't talk about it before. Put in my radios, got everything all set up for my departure. I'm on my tower frequency, have the departure frequency all set up, and I'm rolling. This is going to be good, right? This actually was a pretty fun flight. I got to see a lot of the terrain detail and none of the city and road detail because they are not accurately mapped because I do not have a scenery package for Georgia yet. But I do for the Carolinas and I do for Virginia and up through the New York area. So we should be able to get out of the US with some pretty nice scenery to look at. And let me tell you, this is exactly what you will be seeing inside of the area that I live in. It's just all green. Georgia is amazingly green. Tons and tons and tons of it around. When I lived on Long Island and I flew out of Islip MacArthur Airport, I'd always fly around the coast, whether it be the Long Island Sound or around the Atlantic Ocean, out to Montauk, over to Nantucket, around Plum Island, well, not too close because you weren't allowed to. But I'd go up to Boston or Hartford or Bridgeport or New Haven, New London, Providence, and it would always be something nice to look at. When I'm in Georgia, whenever I flew, it was always just green. Lots and lots and lots of green. Okay, taking a look at my instruments here. Got us paused because I have to reset a couple of instruments over here. And while we do that, I'm just going to put a cut in here and move ahead to the next part. Now, one thing to explain, there is an ATC add-on that you can use called Pilot's Edge. It'll give you full, realistic ATC interaction, kind of like you would have in a real plane. And the way they do that is they have real air traffic controllers monitoring the radios. So when you're calling out, you know, your well, anyway, if you've ever heard the flight instructions given by ATC, they would be realistic and they would be from real people. So I don't have that installed. But I am doing this flight IFR with the ATC that's built into the game directing me along the way, telling me to watch out for aircraft in different places and flying me around things at different points. Coming up off my left, like just about 20 degrees off the nose up there to the left, that's Lake Lanier, big lake formed by damming the Chattahoochee. It's where Atlanta gets most of its water, and always has a fight with other states like I guess that would be Alabama and Florida over how much water they're allowed to dam up or not. Lately, that hasn't been the case because we don't have a drought. It's been raining a lot in Georgia. Big deal. Pretty nice to look at, though. And as we fly over it, as we get closer, I should say, I will let you all see it. It's a few minutes later, and I'm coming up to Lake Lanier off the left side of the aircraft. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the actual idea I have behind this. So I figure if I put up these videos a couple of times a week, they're not going to take me away from Star Citizen. Let's put it this way. Nothing will. But I can't play Star Citizen 24/7 right now because the game isn't live. And I have been playing things like Elite Dangerous quite a bit, but I still have open holes in my schedule of playtime, and I'm thinking that this is probably going to be one of the things that I start to stream. Why? Because I'm not very good at a lot of the games, and I want to get good at streaming. And I'm a good pilot, very decent, okay? And I think that this would be something that would be interesting to me. As I get better, though, I'll start streaming things like Star Citizen, Elite Dangerous, and hopefully, if I can get someone to play multiplayer with me, maybe Civilization 5 or Civilization Beyond Earth. But this is... Oh, did I leave you out, Tracy? I'm sorry. Let me talk about another game I've been playing with that I haven't showed. It's MechWarrior Online because Tracy, Tristar, has pretty much thrown the gauntlet down, or thrown down the hammer and said if I don't, she will, or they will do something nasty to me. I don't know. So I'm going to go jump into that game also. Here we are getting closer, and I should be going to an external view so you can get a better look at it. I like the external views to get a idea of what it is around here. Ooh, and this is when I realized there must have been some kind of button press. I told you that I've been having problems with my X55. I was on the phone with the people from Mad Catz, I should say, with a person that didn't exactly understand what I was saying until the end. And they said that they've had some people complaining about this and they're looking into it. So there must have been some kind of button press that put my flaps down. My flaps are actually one of the knobs on the, not knobs, but one of the, let's put it this way. I would have had to move my hand off of the stick to make my flaps go down. It's not a bad thing though. Pretty good. So I don't like to do the outside view all the time, but I'm going to be doing it in this flight because I want to give you guys an idea of what the scenery looks like, how gorgeous it is in flight. Well, I keep on trying to call this flight simulator, but an X-plane. So I was talking about streaming. I'm going to be streaming this game as soon as I get my setup corrected. I still have to get a webcam for my PC. I have one for my Mac, but there's a decided difference between the performance of this game running on my Mac, which is older. It has a 680 with 2 gigs of RAM built into it and a 3.2 or 3.4 gigahertz i7. But it's older, like I said. If I had the Retina display one, it would be smooth as silk. On my PC, I've got an AMD Vishera with 8 cores running at 4.7 gigahertz, an NVIDIA card with that, not an AMD, and it is a 760, GTX 760, and it is the superclocked one from EVGA, and with the 4 gigabytes of RAM. So that slices through this game really, really fast, and I could run it with most of the options set to ultra or high. Alright, so there you have it. That was the Lake Lanier journey of the trip, or view of the trip. I'm going to skip ahead to the next area of interest, and that's going to be Lake Hartwell. And when I talk about Lake Hartwell, you're all going to remember a movie that some people in Georgia say was based on Lake Lanier, and other people say it was based on Lake Hartwell, which actually sits between the Georgia and North Carolina borders. I don't know. I hope somebody out there can tell me which one it was. So here we are coming up on Lake Hartwell, which is kind of a snaky, curvy, jagged lake. It's off in the distance. We're going to fly over it. And I'm going to take this opportunity just to remind you of what this flight is about. I want to thank each and every one of the servicemen for putting their lives on the line to defend our country and to defend whatever country they're from. So this might not just be for the U.S. soldiers, but it's for all soldiers from all countries that actually listen and watch my show. It's Veterans Day here today in the U.S., and me being a veteran of the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps, I've been told by many people, thank you for your service, and I want to turn that around and say thank you for your service if you were in the military. I never fought, I never was in a battle, but I did have a lot of fun in the military. It was one of the best times of my life, one of the parts of my life that I felt every day I was learning something and every day I was making a difference. And I know it sounds weird, but the military does give you that feeling in most situations, as long as you're putting into it what it's putting back into you. Love this ship, I should say this airplane. The DA-42 looks so futuristic to me, which is one of the reasons I picked it. The other one was I really wanted to do short general aviation aircraft type hops, not these big giant jet hops. I wanted to find places to go that I would never go in real life because I just don't have the time or money to do it. So I'm hoping as time goes on to get better scenery. Lake Hartwell is a pretty big area, so we're going to skip ahead so you could actually see it from above. As we come closer and closer to Lake Hartwell, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the different programs. I've got the Flight Simulator X working kind of sorta on my PC, but I did get PrepBar 3D version 2 from Lockheed Martin, and it's only $10 a month or $200. It's a actually ultra realistic flight simulator, one that you would use for getting hours and for training people. In fact, I believe they train people on the F-22 and the F-35 and C-130s and other aircraft that they make with that software. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back and forth on this trip between the two, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to find this aircraft, the DA-42, with the same stack inside of it there. And maybe I'll just decide that I do go back and forth, just so you all have a better look at the different software and what they have to offer. But what I'm really doing here is trying to bring awareness to our soldiers from whatever country and try to come up with a charity that I can start raising money for as I fly around the world. And I probably will be flying around the world in over 100 different flights. So this is going to be 3 to 4 flights a week. So you're looking at over 25 weeks of flying. So I'm thinking that starting it on the Veterans Day holiday and ending it on the Memorial Day holiday would actually be a good thing. I know that's more than 26 weeks, but there are going to be a few weeks that I do not have I don't have the opportunity to fly. For instance, when my company sends me off to a seminar or to a sales meeting. So I do expect there to be some differences, some in the amount of videos I'm able to put up. So I'm flying at 7,000 feet. And here we go. We are just about ready to cross over into North Carolina. So now you start seeing the difference in the scenery. Not that it's changed drastically, but you could see how there's a little bit more detail and a little bit more accuracy in the coastlines and stuff. Even though they're jagged, they're more accurate. This is a user-created free North Carolina scenery edition that you just download and just dump into your custom scenery folder. And it actually gave me a lot nicer area to look at. And I think that this is something I'll be looking for as I start flying around the world for the different areas that I'm flying into. I expect there to be certain places that do not have this much detail. So I've been thinking about my route, and I want to really touch the places that the soldiers are. And I want to touch things that mean something in history, whether it be U.S. history or world history. So being I'm in the U.S., I'm going to be touching different areas. So the first flight here is to First Flight, where the Kitty Hawk, flown by Orville and Wilbur Wright, or created and flown by them, made its first flight back in 1903. So that's where the first flight is going to. I should have probably flew to Fayetteville, North Carolina first, which is one of the bigger bases in the U.S., and then over to first flight, or I could have flown over to Jacksonville, South Carolina, and I could have, or is it Jacksonville, North Carolina? North Carolina, and I could have flown up to first flight, and Jacksonville, of course, is where Camp Lejeune is for the U.S. Marine Corps. But I totally didn't think about that. So the next flight after this one is going to be up into the Quantico area where the U.S. FBI headquarters is and the United States Marine Corps Officer Training School is, Officer Candidate School. From there I'm going to go and pass through the Washington, D.C. area and fly to an airport on the edge because you're not allowed to fly GA aircraft over D.C. I'm going to fly up to Pennsylvania, over to Long Island, over New York of course, and then up to Boston, and then from there it's going to be over to the European continent via Newfoundland, Greenland, Iceland, Ireland, down through England and touching some of the bases, some of the old B-17 bases that housed the bombers that helped the Allies win the war. From there I'll jump over to France, landing somewhere near Normandy, and then throughout the French countryside into Germany, probably going near Ramstein Air Force Base where a lot of our injured soldiers are flown back to after being injured in battle, and then on to the Middle East. Oh wow, look at the underside of that aircraft. I must have been trying to show off how much detail this guy put into this airplane. Let's jump from Lake Hartwell to the next big thing, which is going to be almost at the very end of this flight as we start nearing the coastline. Here we are getting closer and closer to our target, to our final destination, which is KFFA, or first flight, which is just a small strip. So far, ATC has just been giving me the changes in the altimeter, and I think we're at 3012 at this point, and I think we end up at 3011. And the reason why you have to change the altitude or the barometric pressure is because it's got to check the pressure at different altitudes. That's the only way that you know how high you are. So we're coming in to the coastline. Lots of little lakes and estuaries or harbors. North Carolina is protected, its coastline is protected by a bunch of barrier beaches, which are just sand that's built up from the storms. There's a airfield down below us. Anything in green on ATC that comes up is for somebody else. Anything in yellow is for me. You can see there's the last one of the barometric pressure changes that they gave us. Alright, I'm going to continue this flight ever so slowly, and the scenery gets nicer and nicer here. Now the benefit of going from here to like Quantico is that it's a much shorter flight, and I'll be able to talk through it instead of having to give you such brief highlights of it. And let's put it this way, this is going to be a boring video, I know it is, but I'm doing it for a good reason. And I'm also doing it because I really miss flight simulators. Yes, it seems like it's boring, but there's a lot of skill involved in these things. This is a time when everything starts to go all wonky on me, and I've been flying on autopilot up to this point, just like you would be in real life, monitoring everything, looking at the instruments, scanning your outside, making sure everything is the way it is, putting in all the different altimeter changes that you have to, but all of a sudden, everything goes wonky, and I think I missed a light and put it out by accident. I think my autopilot failed at some point over here, and it was starting to just go off. Didn't catch it. I went back, I tried to watch the video to see where it didn't work anymore, and guess what? It didn't fail. It was another random button press from my X55 HOTUS. Going to have to correct that one. But we're descending to 5,000 feet now, and now I'm going to start being played with by all the weather that was happening over here. I didn't look at the weather, I forgot to get ATIS information, and all of a sudden I'm flying into the coast where they're having 20 knot gusts, and they're having 15 mile an hour crosswinds going into this airfield that I'm trying to land at. It's really not a good thing. Now, you should always know that. Cape Hatteras, that whole area of the barrier beaches, is always having some wind. I mean, when you look at why they flew out there, it was because they were almost guaranteed a 30 knot wind all the time coming straight at them off the ocean. So they had a lot less speed to make up to get this thing to fly, depending on which direction the air was coming from. So I'm used to this weather in a Cessna 172. I don't really have more than about 5 hours of multi-engine time, and that's also 5 hours of variable pitch time. If you don't know what that is, when you're flying aircraft like this, you keep a constant manifold pressure, and you don't really move the throttle. You're moving the propeller pitch to actually give you thrust to get you to cut through the air. And yes, you do use the throttle at some points, but that's just to change the manifold pressure. It's a little bit more difficult to fly a variable pitch aircraft than it is a aircraft like Cessna 172 that is constant speed propeller. You also have other things coming into play in other aircraft that you could fly in the game. And that's, you have turbines, and turbines are jet engines with big giant propellers on them. Those are difficult in that they have spool up and spool down time. So one thing, if anything, that I'm getting out of flying the flight simulators is getting a lot of the knowledge and skill back that I had when I was flying for real. Now, I only have a couple of 100 hours in me, and most of those are in the 10 different general aviation aircraft of single propeller design, single engine design. And they range from the Cessna 150, 152, 172, 180, 182, and then all of the Archer, Warrior, Saratoga, which that had the variable pitch prop, Amal, which had the variable pitch prop, and a couple of other ones. Can't remember all of them. There were a couple of Pipers. Oh, I actually got some time in an aircraft I bet you never even thought I would, and it was an AT6 Texan. I had, which was a stick, and I actually got some time in that when I was in the Civil Air Patrol way back when. I think I got like 1.2 hours in it, and it was kind of fun. I only got to do one landing in it, but I got to do every takeoff that we had, which, big deal, right? You go down the runway, add a little bit of flaps, pull back on the stick, you're up. But we did get to play with that off of the southern tip of the Montauk Point, and it was kind of fun. All right, so we're coming up on FFA. We're being vectored to a straight-in approach. I start trying to look for ATIS over here, and I probably should have had my notepad to write down all of my different radio frequencies that I need. I've got my my VOR working to the correct alternate airport if I need to, which is over here just back. I think we passed it a little bit ago. And that was if there was going to be weather out here. When I first took off, I thought there was going to be some pretty severe weather out here, rain-wise, but I guess I wasn't looking as detailed, paying attention as much as I should about the weather, about the wind out here. It does get a little wonky, like I said. At some point in the near future, I might even fall out of the sky, but I don't think so. You see how it just knocked me over? That's not control input. That's just coming over where you have a lot of different wind going on over here. I think the way that the weather is implemented in this version 10.3 is amazing. But I don't ever remember being blown over like that in my Cessna, and I was in some pretty nasty conditions. My flight instructor was a Harrier pilot in the Marine Corps, and he was pretty intense about always getting me to go up in the worst kind of weather. And at times I was scared, but he taught me how to not white knuckle it, which was holding the controls so much you're not able to really make precise movements. White knuckled is when you're scared and you're holding onto the wheel for dear life. I kind of got used to doing crosswind landings, and everything he taught me actually saved my life about 12 years ago. I was flying in a Civil Air Patrol mission from McCollum Airport, which is the airport we took off from in this mission, and going east across the northern part of the Atlanta perimeter. So just staying north of PDK airspace, which is Peachtree DeKalb. I then was going to fly south towards a airport called Monroe. The reason was to drop off one of the other pilots who was sitting in the right seat, who was a captain, I was a lieutenant, and he was going to be picking up a glider tow aircraft and towing a glider back to Cobb McCollum for a cadet program that we had going on the next day. So this was a Friday afternoon. I was working at IBM, and on Fridays I would go in early because I had a big meeting every Friday at about 5:30 in the morning. So I had no problem, which this is August. It got me out right in the middle of the day, right around 3 o'clock. And that's the worst part of the day to be flying. I'm a meticulous pilot. I pre-flight every aircraft that I fly. I always get the weather, and I always, always, always make sure that I have radio communications along the way. So the first thing that happened is I show up to fly the aircraft, and this other person who's going to remain nameless for the rest of my life, he was supposed to be the one that got the weather and filed the flight plan, because we always file a flight plan, or did at that point, in the Civil Air Patrol. I don't know if they do anymore. Or I should say, our group did. Not every group does. He said yes, no problem. I said, all right. So I already made mistake number one. I did not check the weather myself. I relied on another human being who is fallible, I should say. Next thing up, I go to pre-flight the aircraft, and I always start just to the back of the wing on the pilot side and walk around the aircraft. So when I'm finished, I'm back at the front of the wing on the pilot side, and then I just walk in the aircraft. So I start, and I check the fuel tank. I get back to the empennage section, remove the locks, and he comes out and goes, let's go. We don't have time for this. And I said, well, I'm pre-flighting the aircraft. He said, let's go. I ignore him. I continue to go. He starts playing with the aircraft, and he's sitting right side, and he gets my attention by trying to turn the prop on, by trying to start the motor. And I get a little bit upset. I have another guy flying in the back. I look at him, he just shrugs to me, and I said, all right, I'm coming. So I didn't finish pre-flighting the aircraft. I did most of it, but I didn't get around to the engine to make sure that, bird's nests, oil, and all that other stuff were in there. He claimed the aircraft was flown earlier in the day, but the number of times it took me to start the aircraft, and by the engine logbook, I knew that that was a lie. So that's mistake number two, trusting somebody that just lied to me. There's first flight in front of us, by the way. So we take off, and next piece happens. He's working the radio. We're flying north of PDK, but we still have to talk to them in airspace. And he starts talking in something like this. PDK Tower, this is Cap Flight 12119. And I'm like, what are you doing? Now, I did all my flight training in New York, and I did it in Class C airspace, which was, it was managed airspace, controlled airspace, which I don't know what they call it today. I need to go back and get regulations. So I talked very quick, and I would talk very precisely and enunciate. I took the radio from him. There was no way I was going to allow him to take the radio and keep these people that were trying to get the afternoon private jets landed. So what do I do next? I get out to the other side of PDK airspace, and I look up, and the ceiling is dropping. It's an August thunderstorm pop-up coming down. I look at him and say, we should put down for a little bit. I'm not happy with this. And he was like, nope, I got to get that glider back so we can get everything taken care of tonight. Just turn south. I'm like, no, I'm not comfortable with this. The ceiling is dropping. So we turn south. I'm like, why did I turn south? He's a captain. I'm a lieutenant. I listened to his rank, not the fact that he was sitting in the effing right seat and I was in the left seat. Left seat is pilot in command, by the way. So I turned south, and all of a sudden, the ceiling is down. Wind is blowing, and I see lightning in the distance. I automatically hit the direct to and put in Lawrenceville's airport ID. He goes, what are you doing? I'm putting this aircraft down. He goes, you're flying and dropping me off. And the guy in the back said, you let her do what she wants to do. I was like, oh my God, I am just going to put this down. Just as he said, do not do that, just keep going south. I had a microburst or something, turned my aircraft on the side like that, and lightning hit probably about a quarter mile away, but it blinded me. I told him to shut to pretty much STFU, shut the F up, and I put down with the maximum crosswind component you could have for landing a Cessna 182. I can say that was the last time I flew. I lost the confidence in the people I was flying with, so I lost the will to fly. Civil Air Patrol was a very inexpensive way for me to fly, and I think that they are amazing people and still probably one of the safest group of people that fly out there. But that just made me not feel confident in the people that I was flying with. I was very confident with the person in the back and some other pilots, but I wasn't always guaranteed to fly with them. So, like I said, I had twins at home, my daughter at home, looked myself in the mirror and said, you know what, I can do this when I'm in my late 40s again, which I am. Now I'm doing it in a flight simulator, and that was a pretty difficult story to tell you because I'll tell my close friends that, but I don't like to admit that I was stupid in flying and let somebody else call the shots. It's not the way that a good pilot works. A good pilot always is meticulous. A good pilot always follows a meticulous pre-flight, always gets weather, and is always safe. Otherwise, in the Civil Air Patrol, we're the ones that go out and looking for the people that don't do that. I would hate to have wound up being a person like that. I could tell you more about that story one day. Maybe I'll add more to it as we go on. There's a lot more to that story after we landed. Well, we've got the aircraft down at first flight. There's no scenery for this airport at all. I think it's a Unicom. I don't think it is even a tower airport. You call your different legs. You call your base. We did a straight-in approach, so we didn't actually enter the traffic pattern, which is bad. When you fly into places like this, you're supposed to. So we're going to clean up the airplane, shut it down, and leave it here for our next flight. And that means doing everything in order. So turning off the AV, master. We already have the engines. Oh, we went backwards. We should have shut off the engines first. That's bad. I need to get the checklist for this aircraft up and on my iPad so I can be looking at it at the same time. Well, folks, that was my flight from KRYY to KFFA. It took me 3 hours and 22 minutes, and this is the last flight of that length I will be taking. Every other flight that I take from now on will be no more than 90 minutes, so I can cut it down to an even 30 for you, and maybe even less. Maybe I'll do 40-minute flights only. With that said, you all be safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon. Happy Veterans Day.